out to AY. A beautiful day.
Amen.
Today, great Sabbath. I was in the great state of Arizona earlier in the week for about 5 days. And my wife said, you left and went to sun, then you came back and it's sunny. And so she said, you get to always be in the sun, but she had to suffer through a little bit of bad weather earlier in the week. My name is Pastor Benjamin, and I work for the Oregon Conference Office, and I'm the Young Adult Ministries Director for the conference office. And so we are privileged here with the Adventist Church and the Oregon Conference to have a full department for Young Adult Ministries. And so my role is helping to support the life journeys of post-high school students to pre-marriage, so roughly around 18 years of age to about 26, 28. And just have been so excited about what God has been doing over the last few years. And so we have events that run for young adults all throughout the year. And then I usually spend my summers up at a camp called Big Lake. Has anybody been to Big Lake before?
Yeah.
We had a double hand back there. My mom was actually a charter camper at Big Lake. The very first year Big Lake ever opened, she was a camper that year. And they didn't even have cabins. They had canvas tents. Like, anybody ever stayed in a canvas camp meeting tent? They had tents at Big Lake. So my summers I usually spend at Big Lake working with our 120 young adult staff members that make up the staff there at Big Lake. But yeah, my family and I love the Oregon Conference and our Adventist community here. I spent about 12 years pastoring in the great state of Arizona that's very famous for a large hole in the ground known as the Grand Canyon. And so I pastored for about 12 years in Arizona, and then moved up to Oregon here to do Young Adult Ministries about 3 years ago. And we're excited. Our kids go to school together over at Rivergate. So I'd like to talk to you about the amazing love that we know in God. And so let's pray, and then I'm going to tell you a couple stories. Dear God, thank you so much for all the incredible love you have for us. Thank you for reminding us about that love. And we just thank you for this AY service, for this church, for this community. Thank you, God, that AY is growing. Amen. And more people are coming together to find hope and community and friendship. And we just pray that you will do amazing things. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay. If you have your Bibles, let's take our Bibles out, and I'd like to have you go to Romans chapter 8. So when you found Romans chapter 8, go ahead and say amen, so we know you're in Romans chapter 8. Amen. And then we're going to read a passage, and I'm going to tell you a couple different stories. So Romans chapter 8, when you've got that, go ahead and say amen, so we know you've got it. Amen. Okay, Romans chapter 8. And why don't we go down to Romans chapter 8, verses 38 and 39. So Romans chapter 8, verses 38 and 39. All right, Romans chapter 8, verses 38 and 39. And here's what it says. It says, "For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." Amen? Amen. So the promise we have straight out of the Word is that there is absolutely nothing that can stop God from loving you. Amen? Amen. And it's a love that we don't earn, and it's also a love that we don't lose. It's a love that is there constantly because God is love. Amen? And how do we know what the love of God is like? The Bible says that all that is the love of God was shown to us in God's Son, whose name is Jesus. So if you want to know what the love of God is like, look toward the birth and the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. And as we see Jesus, we see the amazing love of God. Amen? Amen. And how many of us believe that Jesus is risen and alive? Amen. Okay, somebody may say, well, what makes you a Christian? Well, what makes us a Christian is we believe that a guy was dead and is alive today. Amen? And yeah, that may sound a little bit strange, but we believe that we have a friend in Jesus, that Jesus is alive, and that we can know everything about the love of God by knowing and learning about the life of Jesus and that friendship we have with Jesus. And so, I love that passage and that promise that there is nothing that we can do, nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Amen? Okay. When we say there is nothing, that means there is nothing. There is nothing in your past. Okay? There is nothing in the present, and there is nothing in the future that can stop God from loving you, because God is love. Amen? And again, we don't earn it. He doesn't love you because you had an incredible day. He doesn't love you because you got a raise at work. He doesn't love you because you got 100% on your spelling test. How many of you still take spelling tests? Okay, we got a few people, few adults. You're still learning and growing in that spelling. Okay?
Helping with homework.
Yeah, it's helping with homework. But we are not loved because we earn it. We are loved because that is who God is. That's His reality. In the same way, when we have a day that just doesn't go so well, and let me ask you this, how many of us in the last 2 months have had a day that didn't go so well? Maybe something happened. Maybe you had a fight with a best friend. Maybe you got fired from your job. Maybe you got let go from your job. Maybe something happened that was not really positive. Even on our worst days, the love of God never changes. Because God's love is not dependent upon us. It's who He is. It's a reality. Amen? It's amazing. And because God's love is constant, you and I can wake up every day knowing that no matter what happens this day, I am loved. Amen. If your day is bad, you are loved. If you got a low number in your bank account, you are loved. Amen? If you got a fight with your best friend, you are loved. So all this stuff may be happening around you, but we can know what can happen inside of us, and that's the reality that we are always loved. There are some things that you can put together that are impossible to get apart. How many of you have ever used what's known as duct tape? Usually it's silver tape, okay? How many of you have ever wrapped a package before? Maybe a Christmas present or a birthday present? How many of you have got 2 pieces of tape accidentally pressed together? You ever had that?
A mess.
And you're just hoping that there's one little corner that you can pull this tape apart. But what I found is it's pretty much impossible to get tape apart when it has been stuck together. You guys kind of with me? It just doesn't work. You can't separate those things together. And how many of you have ever used any kind of wood? Anybody ever glued 2 pieces of wood together? There's something called wood glue, and wood glue is so strong that if you glue 2 pieces of wood together, when you pull the wood apart, the wood breaks before the glue breaks because it's so strong.
Wow.
The love of God for you, hear me on this, is so strong, you cannot pull it apart.
Amen.
You can't. You can't. It's there. And there was a time in my life, I remember wondering if my dad still loved me because of a complicated situation that had taken place. And I want to tell you about that. When I was growing up, I used to have the opportunity to go and sometimes go to birthday parties or different things in my neighborhood with some of my best friends. And how many of you can think back to when you were a child and you had a best friend as a child? Anybody you still know the name of your best friend, that person who's your best friend? Does anybody still talk to their best friend? Okay. I still talk to my best friend, and his name is Jonathan. He lives outside of Chicago, Illinois. And Jonathan and I loved hanging out together. Matter of fact, we lived in the same neighborhood together. And I would often get invitations to go to parties at his house, or after church we would hang out together. And I would invite him to go to do things at my house. We would go watch the Chicago Bulls play in Chicago. My favorite basketball player, Michael Jordan, often was playing. And so we were always doing things together. And I remember I got an invitation to go to a pizza party at my friend Jonathan's house down the street. And so if you want something to happen, it depends on how it was at your house, you knew which parent to ask. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Like, one parent probably is going to say yes a little easier than the other parent. So the softie was my mom. So I knew that if I could get to my mom first, by the time my dad heard about it, all I'd have to say is, hey, Dad, don't worry about it. Mom already said yes. So I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I got invited to this pizza party, and I'd love to go. It's coming up. And she said, what time is it going to be? And she said, sure, you could go. And so I remember that night getting dropped off at Jonathan's house down the street. And it was great. It was myself and a couple other neighborhood friends. We were going to spend some time together eating food, playing games. And so we ate pizza together. We played games. And then something happened. We began to get a little bit bored. Now, let me ask you this. If you're about 11, 12 years old, can boredom be a dangerous thing?
Yep.
And so here we are about 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, and we had just played a bunch of games, and we decided that we were going to go outside in the front yard of my friend's house, Jonathan's house, and just see what we could find to do, okay? So we went outside, and we were just looking around. And right next to my friend Jonathan's home was this huge mansion that had been built. It was brand new, huge house. From the ground level, it had 3 stories, not just 2, but 3, huge house. And I asked Jonathan, I said, Jonathan, who lives in this house? And he said, well, it's a retired gentleman, and he lives there all by himself. He had a big house. And Jonathan said, why don't we walk toward this big house and let's just look in the window and see if he's in the house. So we walked over to this big house right next door to Jonathan's house, and we looked in the window, and sure enough, the owner was sitting watching TV on a Saturday night in his home by himself. And Jonathan said, yeah, that's the owner. And another friend, and I wanted to let you know, this was not my suggestion. Another friend said, hey, I've got an idea. This friend said, why don't we all circle the house, and we will synchronize our watches, and when the watch hits a certain time, we'll all knock on the windows of the house and see if we can give this gentleman a little scare. Not a very kind thing to do. And I think we have to remember, there are a lot of things that we can do, doesn't mean we should do them. And so I kind of said, I don't know about this, but I said, I guess. So sure enough, we circled the house, all the watches were synchronized, and when the clock hit, I don't know what it was, maybe 8:03, we knocked on the windows at the same time, and when 4 or 5 little boys are knocking on all the windows, it makes quite a racket in the house. And this gentleman got so scared, he rose out of his chair. And so we thought that was kind of entertaining, that was kind of fun. What wasn't fun is when he called the police. And here's what he apparently said to the police when he called 911. He said, there is a gang of boys that are throwing rocks at my house, and I'm afraid they're going to break my windows. And so we thought this was great. We had a good time. It wasn't a really good time for him, but we thought it was kind of fun. And all of a sudden, we're standing in front of the house, True story, we hear the squealing of tires come around the corner, and these police lights are flashing. And all of a sudden, what was fun was not fun anymore. And so this police car comes driving down the street, and there's that moment where you think, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to explain to him what was happening? And somebody just yelled, "Run!" And so we ran through the neighborhood trying to evade the police. And so if you ever have wondered, I have been to jail for a short amount of time. And the police car was kind of coming down the street, and we just took off running. And we didn't know where we were going to go. We just knew we didn't want to be 10, 11, 12-year-old boys right there on the sidewalk as that police car was coming down the street. And so we ran a little ways, away. And as you're running, your mind's thinking, well, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? And we all remembered that about 2 blocks away was a Seventh-day Adventist school. And we thought, that's where we're going to go. When you're in trouble, where do you go? Church or the school? And so we ran down the sidewalk toward the school there. And this school is called Hinsdale Junior Academy. It's the Seventh-day Adventist Junior Academy in Hinsdale, Illinois. Anybody ever been to Hinsdale, Illinois? And so we run up, and as we're coming to the school, a miracle happens. There's lights on in the school, and the front doors of the school are open, and we thought, Jesus saves! Jesus saves! Like, the doors are open, we can just go inside, this is going to be great, So I'm kind of running and praying like, Jesus, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get picked up by the police. And so here the lights are on in the school, and we think it's great. And so we run right into the foyer or the lobby of the school. The lights are on the hallway, and apparently there is a gym night happening. Anybody ever been part of a gym night before?
Yeah.
Volleyball, basketball. And so we thought, this is great. We're just going to blend in with the gym night. And so we go into the gym, and I walk into the gym and just kind of start moving my arms, like I'm playing volleyball, setting, spiking, bumping. And we're there hanging out, and I look in the hallway, true story, the police are coming into the school. And I thought, what happened? I thought Jesus saved. The police are coming down the hallway, and I'm thinking we're just going to blend in. But then I thought, we better just get out of the gym. So we walk upstairs to a balcony, kind of like the balcony of the church here, and we just sit in the balcony. And I'm looking over the edge, and so as I'm looking over the edge of the balcony, 3 police officers walk into the gym. I thought, this is bad news. And so I pull my head back from the balcony, and all of a sudden, I hear these footsteps coming up the stairs to the balcony. And I thought, how do they know these things? And they come up the balcony, and they come and walk right towards the 5 little boys that are sitting there in the balcony. And this police officer says to me, he says, son, you and all your friends need to come downstairs. This just keeps getting worse. So we go downstairs, and he says, the police officer says to me and the 4 other boys, he says, what are you guys doing here? And I said, well, officer, obviously, we're here for the gym night, and we're playing volleyball at the gym night. And he says, let me tell you something that's peculiar. He says, you are 5 Caucasian, white, 11, 12-year-old boys. Everybody inside the gym is Filipino. So here we are, running from the police. Doors are open. Jesus saves. We go into the gym and not realizing from the Filipino church. And so when the police officers came in, they said, obviously, 5 of you are not like the rest of you. And the police officer said, we're going to take you to the station. And so in the parking lot of the Avenue School were 3 police cars. And I remember sitting in the back of the police car, and I thought to myself, I've only seen this on the movies. And here I am in the back of this police car. Oh. And here's what I thought. My mom is going to kill me. Oh. So we get to the police station, and they divided all of us up into these like conversation rooms that had wire on the glass. And the police officer came in and he said, son, you have 1 phone call. And I said, it's real. Like that's what I thought they would say. They really said it. And so I went to the phone, and my hands were shaking, 11 years old, sweating, crying. I had hair back then, I was sweating. And I picked up the phone, and I dialed my number, and I remember that I dialed it incorrectly. Oh. And I caught myself because I remembered only 1 phone call. So I dialed the number, and it began to ring. And here's what I'm thinking about in my head. Please let it be Mom. Please let it be Mom. I really don't want to talk to Dad. How many of you grew up in a home where you would rather talk to Mom, possibly than Dad? So the phone rings, and I hear a voice, and it's Mom's voice. Yes. And I said, Mom, you're not going to believe it. Mom, I'm in jail. And she said, stop kidding around. And I said, Mom, I'm in jail. And then she said the words that just brought terror to my mind. She said, hang on, I'm going to get your father. So my dad gets on the phone, and here's what he says. He says, Ben, stop messing around with your mom. Where are you? And by this time, it's kind of like this whimper, cry voice, like, Dad, I'm at the police station. And he said, I'm going to be right down. So I go back to this room, and I am sitting there, and from this little holding cell area, I can see through a window, and I can see the lobby of the police station. And so I'm looking through the window, and so it's me, this door with wire in the glass, and then there's a little open walkway, and there's a big counter that has one of these drawbridge sections of the counter, and that's how you let people in from the lobby to the back. So it's the door, it's the counter, it's the lobby, front door, and so I'm just watching through the door, and all these thoughts are coming into my head about, why did I do that thing? And how is my dad going to react when he sees me? And I can't wait for him to get here, but I'm kind of nervous about him getting here at the same time. So all these thoughts are beginning to come into my mind, and here's what I begin to do. In that moment, I begin to think, what I have done was so bad. Like I scared this innocent gentleman at his house. I ran from the police. I did a hideout in a Filipino gym night. And now I'm here in this police station. And I begin to think to myself, I wonder if my dad still loves me, or if he's still going to love me after this. And we may think, well, yeah, you were only 12. But there are so many of us of all different ages that have something happen in our life. Maybe it's something we do, or maybe it's something that somebody does to us, where we begin to question whether or not the Father still loves us. Well, if this person that was supposed to love me didn't really love me, then I must be unlovable. Or I did this thing that I regret, or I said this thing I shouldn't have said, or I have this memory in the past that's a negative thing, and maybe God doesn't fully love me because of that thing, or because this person in my life was supposed to love me, and they didn't, and if they didn't love me, I must be unlovable, or God's not going to love me because I did that thing. Let's remember clearly. And if you walk away with anything this afternoon, please remember this. We don't earn God's love. And we can't lose God's love. God's love is there because God is love. Amen. And it's a reality that is always constant. On your worst days, guess what? You're loved. On your best days, when you get that promotion that you've been waiting for years, you're loved. But you're not more loved on that day than on your worst day. Because God is love. And I begin to wonder, does my dad still love me? Is he going to love me after this? So I'm crying, sweating, nervous. I went through, it must have been 20 minutes of telling the police we were not throwing rocks at anybody's window. We banged on the glass and just retelling, what really had happened. And as I look into that window, all of a sudden, I see the lobby door come open. And I'm looking through the glass, and how many of you can recognize somebody just by the way they walk? Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Like you can recognize somebody by the way they stand, maybe by the shape of their head or the way they walk. And I looked and I thought, I knew it. Like, that is my dad. And so I'm looking through the glass and he's coming up to the counter. And as he comes up to the counter, I remember, 11, 12 years old, beginning to just say out loud, Dad, I'm in here. Like, Dad, I'm in here. Wanting my dad to notice me, to see me, to know where I was. And so I remember just yelling in that room, but he couldn't hear me. And I could see him talking to the police officer there at the counter by the drawbridge. And the police officer turns around and he comes over to the door and he turns the doorknob. And it was like that little tiny doorknob turn. Something told me there's hope. Like, maybe I can get out of here. And so the doorknob turns and the door comes open. And I remember taking a step out of that room. And here I am here. There's the drawbridge dividing my dad and I at the counter. And my dad is on the other side. And I begin to just say, Dad, Dad. And the police officer turns to me as if to say, just give us a second. And he turns over to my dad, and here's what he says. He says, is this your son? And my dad, he could have messed with me a lot. But my dad didn't skip a beat. He didn't hesitate. He said, that's my son. And he pointed right at me. And as he saw me, there was no hesitation. And it was like I knew in that little moment that it's going to be okay. Because I know that whatever had happened, I'm still connected to him. And I'm still his son. And if I'm his son, I know that I'm loved. And so all of a sudden that drawbridge opened up. And I began to walk through underneath that little bridge, and my dad just put his hand out like this. And my dad grabbed me by the hand, and we just turned around and we walked out of that police station. And we got in the car. And you know what my dad didn't do? He didn't ask for an explanation. Okay? He didn't shame me. He didn't tell me that I had done something bad. When we mess up, we know we've already messed up. He didn't try to make me feel bad. I already had felt bad enough. But he took me by the hand. We got in the car. We drove home in silence together. And as we were driving home, something had happened. But his love was greater than what had happened. And his love was greater than my mistake. And his love was greater than that regret that had happened. And all that mattered was knowing in that moment that I am loved and that he calls me his son. And no mess up, bad decision, synchronization of the clocks with the kids was going to stop the Father from loving the Son. Amen? I had the opportunity of having a good dad growing up. I know that everybody may have not had that same experience, but all of us have a heavenly Father that promises in his word when he says this: "For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation." That's everything. And you may think, oh yeah, well, I've got, no, everything. Oh, you don't know? No, everything. Oh, everything. Are you with me? Love this. Nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God.
Amen.
Amen. God loves you like duct tape. And you may think you're pulled apart, but you're not. You're right there. And that's the incredible love that God has for us. Amen?
Amen.
When we know we are loved, we can be free to truly live. And to live from the confidence of knowing that we are sons and daughters. Knowing what the Father thinks about us. Knowing on our best days or our worst days, that love doesn't change, because God's love is not dependent upon us, it's God. It's who he is. Amen?
Amen.
So here's my challenge. Let God love you.
Amen.
Let him love you. Be able to say now or sometime today, just let these words come out of your mouth. I am loved. I am loved. I am loved. Say it with me. I am loved. I am loved. Because God is love. Amen?
Amen.
All right, I'm going to leave you with that. Should I pray? Yeah. Okay. Let me pray. Dear God, I want to thank you so much for this church, for this community. We know that when we really know that we are loved, it unlocks the ability for us to truly live and to love other people. We know that anything in our past, the present, or the future, nothing can pull us away from you. And thank you for encouraging us this afternoon that you love us, that you know us, that you created us, that you care for us, that you cherish us, that you have a plan for us, that you have gifted us, that we have abilities from you. And thank you for letting us know that we are loved. And may we start every day with that declaration from your word, just waking up and being able to say, I am loved because God says so. Amen. And I'm going to live every day from that reality. It's not dependent upon me. It's who he is. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.